Welcome back to our lesson on soil. I just want to remind everybody the difference between organic and inorganic parts within our soil. So if you look at just kind of this cup of soil that I have in my hand, I can probably see a lot better the different parts, but if I just hold up an organic piece of soil would be something like this leaf that has once been living and then died and become a part of the soil, adding different nutrients and decomposing to be a part of that soil to give life to other plants. Or even inorganic would be something like the very, very small pieces of rocks that make up kind of the greatest part of the soil. And those are non-living items. Other things that are inorganic in soil would be like water or air, and they just kind of help build up the structure of the soil. Going back to those organic pieces like the leaves, there's other examples like small little pieces of bacteria or living things like worms or insects that run through the soil. Those all give life to the soil because they're organic, meaning of the living. So now that I'm done with our soil and kind of reviewing the organic versus inorganic, we're going to dive into our lesson for the day, which is we're going to be creating our own little soil cup that we'll be able to enjoy at the end of the lesson. Today we're going to be creating soil for dessert, and we're going to need a couple of items with us before we get started with our activity. So first of all, I want you to grab your soil for dessert kind of checklist or recipe list out of your packet. And then once that's there, we'll also kind of need a pencil to complete our task. The next thing is we're going to probably need to ask an adult or the person in our household for some kitchen items that will help us with our activity. Number one, we're going to need a bowl and a spoon to do some mixing, and maybe a cup if we want to present our dessert a little bit. The main ingredient that we'll need for this activity is a pudding cup, and we'll just need one pudding cup, but I have my pack here. And then I have my other ingredients that are going to help build my dessert. You don't have to have all these ingredients. These are just the ingredients that I have. And we'll see in a little bit how that helps with our activity. But just to give you an example, I have some cookies, I have some gummy worms, I have graham crackers, and I have marshmallows. And it might sound a little crazy how this is all going to come together, but I trust you it's going to be a fun, exciting, and very delicious dessert that we're going to build. Once we have all of our ingredients collected and we're ready to begin our activity, the first thing that we're going to look at is our soil for dessert worksheet. When I look at our soil for dessert worksheet, number one, I see at the top, I want to write my name and today's date so I can remember, who did this. Number two, we have some directions. So first of all, it says step one, listing. Use the materials provided to create your own dessert toppings and dessert treat. We're going to fill out the table below with the ingredients list. With this list, we're going to identify each ingredient as organic or inorganic. So I'm talking about the ingredients that we've collected, like how I have here of my ingredient of marshmallows, for example. And then we're going to say what marshmallows, for example, represents within our real soil. How are we going to kind of compare that to the different parts that we know exist in soil? So if we look at number one in our chart, it's already filled out as an example and kind of as our base. So we're starting with chocolate pudding. So I wrote that here under dessert ingredient, number one, chocolate pudding. To the right, we have what soil ingredient that is. So I'm saying that chocolate pudding is going to be our water within our soil. It's kind of liquidy and it can move around a lot, but it's still going to hold everything together, which is the point of an inorganic structure or an inorganic element in our soil to provide structure to the soil. So I've labeled what my actual ingredient is, which is chocolate pudding, and then I've classified it as the water in our soil. And then I've decided it's an inorganic ingredient. So for the next four, so numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5, we are going to decide what those are in our soil and if they're organic or inorganic. So I'm going to proceed to do that with some of my ingredients here. So first, looking at some of these, I'll start off with our marshmallows. So I'm going to write in here marshmallow. And marshmallow has a W. And when I think of marshmallows, I think of them being very airy and light and fluffy. So I'm going to call them the air in my soil. They're going to be my little air pockets or little air molecules in my soil that, provide more structure to it. So since I know air is a non-living component, it is an inorganic. So I'm going to label it as inorganic here on the far right. So that was just one of my ingredients, and I'm going to do this for all of my ingredients. So let's say we move on to my Oreos. So I'm going to write down Oreo cookie. And what do we think an Oreo could represent within the soil? So we know that cookies are kind of tough, but they're easy to break apart and to get in a bunch of pieces. And when I think of Oreos, they're dark, because the cookie's real dark. So maybe I think they'll be my tiny broken up little rocks or rock particles that are in my soil. So I'm gonna put rocks, and maybe I'll put a small descriptor like crushed or broken up. Kind of visualize what we're going to be doing on it a little bit later. And we know that rocks are also a non-living ingredient, so we're going to label it as inorganic. And if we think about it, the air and the water and the rocks are all going to hold together really well, and they're going to stick to each other very well and kind of make our dessert or pudding cup stay together. So that kind of goes with the same theme of inorganic being very structural for soil, holding it all in place. If I move on a little bit to my next ingredient, I have these gummy worms. These are actually twin worms, so they're stuck together. I'll write down here gummy worms under dessert ingredients. And then under soil ingredient, gummy worms translate really, really well into actual worms, live little critters going through our soil. So I'll write down here worms. And since worms are living creatures, we're going to label them as organic. They bring some sort of life to our soil. And by those worms interacting with the soil, whether eating it and depositing different items within the soil, that's going to bring life and nutrients and energy into the soil. So I'm going to put organic. And then my last item is my graham crackers. So graham crackers are probably also something that I'm going to want to break up because I don't want a whole graham cracker in my pudding cup. But I don't really think of graham crackers like my Oreos as being little small rocks. I think of them being like long strips, almost like bark. So they would be a great example of bark in my soil, or something that's woody, or a plant that has once been alive but now dried up in a part of our soil. So I'm going to put graham crackers. And how do you spell graham cracker? And then I'm going to put bark. And since bark was once living, even though it might not be living now, it was once a living plant, it's still considered organic. So now I have a complete ingredients list. I've numbered 1 through 5, and I've identified what dessert ingredients are included, what soil ingredients, if they were existing in the real world, how would that soil kind of all mix together, and then if they're organic or inorganic. And this is to remind us that soil is not a non-living thing. It's very much living. It has inorganic and organic parts. So it's very structural. It's kind of like this table where it's just a structure to stand up. But it's also like me living and existing and a part of our ecosystem. So it all kind of mixes together to provide a great environment for plants to grow. So now that we have our ingredients list, we're going to move on to actually mixing our items together and creating a fun dessert that resembles soil in the real world. So now, like any good chef, we have our recipe or a list of ingredients, and now it's time to, do the cooking and put it all together so that way we can create our dessert. So looking at this ingredients list that I've come up with, chocolate pudding is number 1. So I'm going to break open my chocolate pudding. Going to take 1 cup, and I have my bowl ready to go to dump my cup into there, so I have a big mixing bowl to get it all mixed together. And of course I have to lick the label because it's delicious. And I love chocolate pudding. And then I'm going to take my spoon and just dump out all the pudding into the bowl. I'm going to try to get all of it. And I can kind of use my finger to kind of get that rest off. Okay. So now moving on to my second ingredient list, we have the marshmallows. So I'm going to open up my bag of marshmallows. And these, remember, resemble my air. So let's think about how much air do I want to do in my soil. Maybe I'll do 5 little air pieces in there and see how it mixes together. Maybe I'll add some more if I feel like it's not enough airiness in my soil. Okay, now moving on, I have Oreo cookies, which are my rocks. Another inorganic piece of our soil today that we're building. And I said I was going to crush them or break them up. So let's see if I can just do that with my hands. Let's see. So we're breaking up Oreos into little rocks into our soil. I'm just using my fingers to do that. There we go. I'm gonna use my spoon to maybe crush those guys up a little bit. Okay. Hands are getting a little dirty, so maybe grab a napkin in between to wash yourself off so you're not getting too dirty all over your kitchen. Next I have on here is gummy worms. So we're going to start adding some life to our soil mixture. We're going to start adding some organic pieces. Let's see. And I'll add like 2, actually I'm going to add a 3rd one. I'm going to say my soil is super wormy and has lots of worms crawling all in and out through it. So I'll throw my worms there in the bowl. And then our last item is going to be the graham crackers, which are the bark. So this is another organic piece, but I'm going to have to break it up a little bit like I did with the Oreos. Oh, cool. So I'm going to try and break up my bark into little strips. So I'm going to see if I can get that more like a strip like that. Place it down in there. It's not necessarily crushed like our Oreos, but a little bit longer, so it kind of resembles the bark that's in our soil. Oh, that one didn't work out so hot. But I'll keep the pieces a little bit larger. And I'll maybe do one more. Okay, We have gone through all of our ingredients. We have our inorganic mixture and our organic mixture here in our soil for dessert. The last step is going to be to mix it all together. So I'm just going to mix it all together with my pudding here a little bit, clean it off the spoon, maybe crush a few things up so our soil kind of all gets together. Get everything there off the side of the bowl. You know, I think that I'm missing a few more air pockets. It's just kind of to my taste. I want a little bit more marshmallows, but we can add a few more air pockets into our soil a little bit and aerate it and mix it all together until it's totally mixed, so it wouldn't be kind of clear what parts were which parts, because our soil is, even though we have organic and inorganic parts, they all kind of meld together and are all fused together. So we're going to want to do the same thing with our dessert. Okay. Now we have our wonderful, delicious, messy, slightly disgusting pudding mix, and we have a little dessert to enjoy and remind us about soil. So please enjoy this dessert, and if it doesn't taste good, maybe you can try a different soil mixture with different organic and inorganic parts that taste a little bit better. But I'm gonna go ahead and enjoy my soil, and thank you for watching this today and learning a little bit more about ag and how soil works and is structured.